I get a step stool. It is an honor to speak on this 25th anniversary of the wall. To the women who served in country and around the world during the Vietnam War, the wall is an extremely personal memorial. We knew and cared for many of those men and women whose names rest there. As a nurse who served in country, this is my story. I do not remember many of their names, but the faces and the spirit of the men I cared for are ever present in my heart. Their fight to live, their surprise at dying. The young man whose helicopter was shot down and who spent 3 days pinned under the wreckage until he was rescued. He was brought to the 3rd Field Hospital, Saigon, and while we were trying to stabilize him, he closed his eyes and died. The young captain who was brought to us with massive wounds, he constantly asked, "How were his men? Treat them first." He was dead 4 hours later. He was 26. Or the night I had to run to the operating room for supplies. There in the corridor on a stretcher was a tall, blonde young man who looked like many of the fellows I grew up with in Minnesota. He seemed asleep, so I stopped to check on him. He was dead. He bled out on the way to the hospital. And the young man with severe groin injuries, who was so worried because, "Lieutenant, I never even had a girlfriend." At least 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, for a year, we worked with and for our brothers. We were mother, sister, loved one, and nurse to our guys. Most were between the ages of 19 and 22. The nurses lived a reverse reality of the war. When there was a victory, we saw only casualties. While the sound of the Huey helicopter meant rescue for the GIs, it meant more wounded, sorrow, and anguish for the nurses. Newly arrived nurses said, "Be sure and take your uniform off as soon as you get stateside. Things aren't pretty for anyone in uniform." As soon as I hit the United States, I took off my fatigues and combat boots and threw them in the trash. When I returned home to Minnesota, everyone expected me to be the same person who left. But I had changed profoundly. I had seen too much. The losses were too great. For not only had I lost my brothers, I had lost the trust I had in my country and the faith I had in the Army system. The men and women came home. There were no facilities to care for them. Agent Orange kept affecting our lives, and they tried to tell us it was all in our minds or an act of God. Certain veterans organizations would not let us join because we had lost the war. Post-traumatic stress, drug addiction, and alcohol abuse surged through our ranks, and there was little to nothing available to help us. Each time I heard of these things, the anger and rage grew. How could our government do this to us? We did what they asked, what they demanded, and then they abandoned us. The more we were denied and rejected, the quieter and more withdrawn I became. As years went by, I started hearing of groups of Vietnam veterans drawing together to help one another. Vietnam Veterans of America was started. I heard there was to be a memorial dedicated for Vietnam veterans. Rolling thunder started roaring into Washington. and Diane Evans, my hoochmate and lifetime friend, started talking about a memorial for the women. At about this time, my daughter asked me to speak at her college, Mount Holyoke, where she was a student, about the woman's experience in the war. I was fearful, but said yes. She introduced me by saying, "I'd like you to meet my mother, Edie Meeks. She was a nurse in Vietnam, and I'm so proud of her." She was proud of me and my service, and it was the first time anyone had ever said that to me. At the dedication of the Vietnam Women's Memorial, I went to the wall for the first time. I touched it and cried. The wall makes real to the world what we saw every day. I felt as if I had been a prisoner of the war, and the wall was the key that unlocked the door to my cell. Today I visit the wall, and it's like visiting family. I talk to my guys. I ask them to take care of their fellow veterans, to hold them close and to tell them it's okay to live. I ask them to watch out over the new soldiers, men and women, our children, our grandchildren, who are placed in harm's way by others. The experience of the wall helped me to pick up the uniform of honor. Today, I am so proud I was an Army nurse. I am so proud I served in Vietnam. Wait, and I can say out loud to my guys and my gals, we are the best. Welcome home.